that brings me to our first introduction of tonight. Our first speaker, Michael, has over 20 years of indirect sourcing experience and is the founder of the Procurement Foundry, the world's largest gathering of procurement and supply chain professionals. Procurement Foundry is now focused on improving sourcing as a whole through building a collaborative community, such as the Procurement Foundry, where these practitioners can come together to gather and learn. It is my pleasure to introduce our first keynote speaker, Michael Cadieux.
Hi, how are you all? That's good. It's hot, so I want to thank Eric for putting the Husky Kid on stage with all the windows. Appreciate that. Thank you for the introduction. I just want to take a second and thank Eric and the PAS team very much. Thank you for the person who booked my airline on the airline that started 9 months ago. I really appreciate that. That was great. I found them. That's not a joke. I actually was on a plane with a company that started 9 months ago yesterday. Anyway, so my name is Mike Cadieux. I want to talk to you a little bit. Eric asked me to talk a little bit about trends, top procurement trends. So I thought maybe I would show you a little bit about what my community is, who I am, and what they talk about. I tend to talk really fast, and I also tend to lose my breath a little bit, so just bear with me. But at the same time, where are we? All right, cool. So let me ask you the question that I ask every time I sit in the audience with you. I've spoke probably 60 or 70 times. I've been to Gartner Symposium and all the other conferences. And the first question I usually ask when I stand and sit down in your seat is this guy worth 60 minutes of my time? Because I'm between you and a cocktail lounge right now. I don't know if I am. Maybe you can tell me afterwards, and if not, I'll buy you a drink. All right? I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. I'm going to tell you a little bit, I'm going to try and do some networking with you all in the room. We'll ask you a couple questions just to kind of gauge the room. I want to talk a little bit about some of the macro procurement trends that I'm seeing, and I'll tell you how I see those. Some of the micro-technology sourcing trends that I see as well as part of my community. I'll also talk a little bit about some of the things that are happening from support and countermeasures that take place in the community and things that we're seeing. Also talk a little bit about some emerging topics, things that you should be thinking about. And then finally, I'll give you a little bit of personal career development information that we do at Procurement Foundry, because we have a huge salary and compensation database. So does that sound okay? Everybody all right with that? Cool. Are you falling asleep? You look really tired all of a sudden. Oh, you all right? Cool. All right, so a little bit about myself. Oh, wait a minute. Can we, oh, geez. I haven't done this in a while. First public speaking engagement in 2 years. Sorry, folks. That is so funny. Okay, is this guy worth the next 60 minutes of your life? I was wondering why you weren't laughing at that. I was like, wait a minute, that's actually funny crap. So is this guy worth the next 6 minutes of your life? Probably not, but we'll see. Okay, so is this guy worth 60 minutes of your time? Let me tell you a little bit about myself. I spent 13 years in the seafood industry before I came to corporate America. That's how I put myself through college. I went to Marist College in Poughkeepsie, New York. But I've literally done just about everything that there is to do in the seafood industry. When I left the seafood industry, I was running the largest auction house in the United States. And I was in charge of operations. And then I met some guys who wanted to break my legs, and I decided I should come to corporate America. That's a true story. Here's a hint. For those of you who want to know, always eat the local fish. And if you did see the documentary around the Codfather on HBO, I do actually know that guy. And they only got about 30% of the story right, actually. So, 8 years at Digitas. I used to be the VP of IT. I actually can speak geek, even though I'm not a geek. And I say that with all the affection in the world to the CIOs in the room. So I can actually, and we talked about this last night, I actually know about an IP stack. And I am actually Novell certified. It means, there you go. Anybody else Novell certified? No one except for me. Okay, cool. This is going well. So after being at Digitas, Digitas got acquired in 2008. They were the largest digital advertising agency in the world, privately owned at that time. 2008, a French company named Publicis Group came in and purchased them. Do any of you know who Publicis Group is? Fantastic. The only reason why I got to go to work for Publicis Group is because my last name is Cadieux. That's it. I'm convinced of that. Publicis Group is now the largest advertising agency in the world, and they did not have a corporate procurement department at the time, and they hired me to build it out for them. So I spent 10 more years building out as the CPO of North America, and during that time, I was responsible for somewhere in the area of about $2.5 billion worth of spend. I had about 100 business units, and I had about 70 CFOs or controllers that were buying my goods and services. And every quarter we would go to meetings, which I affectionately called the piñata sessions, and they would beat the crap out of me and tell me why they could do it better than I could. Sound familiar to anyone? Cool. All right. Then I launched, in 2018, I decided to leave Publicis Group, and I launched my own consulting firm with no clients. That was a fun moment, what my wife calls the CAT scan moment. She thought that I was absolutely insane and thought that I should probably go back to work and beg for my job back. And I swore that I would never work in the advertising industry again. My first client, an advertising agency, absolutely. My friend from VaynerMedia called me up and I took on VaynerMedia as a client with Gary Vaynerchuk. Anybody know who Gary Vaynerchuk is? That guy was my first client. That was a lot of fun. I then realized that at Publicis Group, I had a staff of about 80 people in the Chief Procurement Officer role, and I actually hadn't negotiated a contract in an extremely long time, and my kung fu was really, really rusty. So I went from negotiating a $27 million Microsoft deal to negotiating a $200,000 Microsoft deal, and realized I have absolutely no idea how to negotiate a $200,000 Microsoft deal. So what did I do? Like any other person, I got on LinkedIn and created a small little group, and I called it basically Fight Club. Some of you are actually in the audience right now that were there at the beginning. And we started talking about contracts, and I started fine-tuning my skills again, thinking, all right, well, I'll just use this group as a community to kind of get my consulting business back up to speed. And then, strange thing happened on the way to building a consulting firm. My LinkedIn group went from 40 people to 800 people in 5 months. And I was vetting every single one of them, and you couldn't search for it, and you couldn't find it. So all of a sudden, 800 procurement people wanted to do things under Chatham House rules in a LinkedIn group that was linear and non-searchable. And people started saving millions and millions of dollars in weeks. So called up my consulting partner, and I said, I have no idea what we have. It's some kind of bizarre social petri dish experiment, but I think it's got legs. So maybe you should handle the consulting side of the business and I'll handle that. So what I did was I handed off the consulting business to my partner, and in 2018, in July of 2019, we took 400 of the most collaborative people inside of our LinkedIn group and created a company called Procurement Foundry. At this point, we still don't know if we can monetize it, and we don't really know what it is. Not something I would also recommend. But we did start a Slack-based community with 500 collaborative people, and it started to grow. And I'll tell you a little bit about that. So that's my background. Any questions so far? By the way, I like to have interactive sessions. Anybody have any questions? Nothing? Fantastic. How about what is the Procurement Foundry? How many of you have heard of the Procurement Foundry? Are there any members of the Procurement Foundry in the room? Yeah, these two don't count. You started last night. Okay, so we have one Procurement Foundry member in the room. Cool. Hold on, got to go forward. I went forward. So the Procurement Foundry, as I said, had humble beginnings. It was a LinkedIn group that I converted into a Slack community. And I did it for one reason. Well, a couple of reasons. One, I used to be a chief procurement officer, and I hated sending people to conferences and asking them, what did you learn? And they said, I have no idea. And I said, who did you network with? And they said, some guy who bought drinks on Tuesday night. I said, okay. So I decided that the most valuable part of going to a conference is Tuesday night at the bar at around 10 p.m. when people are drunk and they really want to talk about their contracts. And I thought to myself, how could I recreate that scenario constantly, 24 hours a day, 365 days a year? So I thought, I'll build a community. And I'll take the people from LinkedIn and I'll put them in Slack, but I'm going to vet every single member. Everybody who tries to become a member of Procurement Foundry, I personally vet. Well, I don't anymore unless they get escalated to me because my team can't figure out who you are or what you do, or if you're cloaking yourself and looking like a procurement person even though you're a salesperson, which happens all the time. So I thought, okay, that was question number one was, could I recreate that Tuesday night environment at Gartner Symposium in the kimono before I passed out in the bush, right? Because that's when the real good stuff happens. I didn't fall asleep in the bush. I fell asleep at the bar, at the piano bar, if you want to know the real story. Okay, so Procurement Foundry gets founded, and I thought to myself, another question, because I'm a geek. I used to buy a lot of tech, right? I bought $400 million worth of tech back in the day. Then I invested in a team, and the team bought almost $800 million worth of tech on an annual basis. I thought to myself, what about if I put 500 technology sourcing people in one room, closed the door, and didn't let any salespeople in? Would they actually talk to each other and help each other out? They do, shockingly. Adam? They do. So I wanted to answer that question. I also wanted to answer questions like, do women make less money than men in the procurement industry? Right? Do women CPOs make less money than men? 16.5% based on the latest survey information. I wanted to answer a lot of other questions like, could you potentially eliminate Gartner's $47,000 fee by having a collaboration room? Would the people who buy marketing and advertising together actually talk to each other, or are they just prima donnas all day long? All these questions were rattling around my head when I decided to create this thing. But again, had no idea how we were going to monetize it. Also not a good business plan, right? But I thought, it'll be interesting, it'll be a petri dish. So now, what does Procurement Foundry become? If you don't know what it is, as I said, it's an online community of procurement professionals, and it has 5,800 people in 127 different countries who collaborate in a Slack environment. About 15% of that community talks to each other on a daily and a weekly basis, and they represent somewhere in the area of about $1.3 trillion worth of buying. The group has 20,000 followers, which is almost 1/5 of procurement leaders right now, and is a little bit less than half of the ISM in 2 years. It also has an average knowledge base of about 10.5 to 11 years right now, and it also has, unbeknownst to me, we had a bunch of people who wanted to start regional chapters, so we started 41 regional chapters around the world. Then COVID hit, so we couldn't get together, but they're coming back online. So I've created this bizarre community of people who actually want to share and help each other. So that's Procurement Foundry. Any questions around Procurement Foundry so far? Anybody want to know if you could be a member? Yeah, you're already a member. So if you're in procurement, or if you're a CIO who has procurement questions, you can become a member of the Procurement Foundry and either listen in on what my 1,500 technology buyers are talking about on a daily basis, or you can join them in the conversation. And it's free. A lot of people ask questions why it's free. Yes, sir, go ahead. That's a great question. So Eric asked, who's the target audience for Procurement Foundry? Anybody who's buying anything, honestly, Eric. We've got 5,800 members. 19.5% of them represent light industrial manufacturing. We've got pharmaceutical. We've got kids who are in school for supply chain management, all the way up to chief procurement officers, and we even let in CIOs now, right? As long as you're not selling something, right? And we've had this conversation. Unfortunately, Eric is not allowed into the Procurement Foundry because we just couldn't help ourselves if there were 5,800 people and no other people. I built a lake full of stocked trout, and I don't let anybody else fish in my lake except for myself, right? And I do it for a reason, because I also want to help the 5,800 people that are in the room. We do things like Halloween costume giveaways for the kids who are the cutest kids in the Halloween costumes. We have a 501c where we give away scholarship money to members of the Procurement Foundry as well. We do a lot of mentoring of our members. So it's a true community in every sense of the word. Yes, go right ahead. Good question. Do we raise? Yes, so we do have a true 501c and we do take donations in. Yes, we take donations in, charitable donations, and our members actually make donations at times. So if we run a virtual conference, there's a button that says, if you like today, typically you have to buy a $150 ticket to come to one of my virtual conferences, But if you want to make a donation to Procurement Foundry, any one of our 5,000 members can make a donation anytime they want. But we give away scholarships to Procurement Foundry members and or their dependents. So last year we gave away 3 scholarships. This year we're giving away 10. Anyway, that's Procurement Foundry. Inside of Procurement Foundry in the last 2 years, there's been 100,000 posts. So people asking questions and things like that, right? So collaboration is very, very heavy in there. And then last but not least, about 70% of the chatter is public and about 30% of the chatter is private. So usually a conversation will start inside of Procurement Foundry and then they'll take it offline. They'll say something like, hey, I'm working on X, Y, and Z. I need some help. And then somebody will say, hey, I know about that, or yes, I know about that. And then they'll have a private conversation later on down the road about something and hopefully get some value out of it. Or make a connection, or hey, I'm looking for a job, or hey, my kid needs to get into Syracuse University, whatever it is, right? So, any other questions? How the heck do I make money? Yeah, good question. For the first 2 years, we didn't. And then one very large P2P player called and said, okay, my sales guys aren't getting in the front door. How do I get in there? I need to put my sales guys in there. I said, you can't. But what I can do is I can dip into my days at Digitas. I can create a marketing campaign strategy for you. And I can present your brand against my community for the next 12 months. Go ahead. I'm sorry, the question was, how do I vet the questions that people ask inside of the community? I don't vet the questions. The community governs itself, believe it or not. Yeah, and if you DM a bunch of people because you moved as a procurement manager to something else and my sniffer hasn't found you yet, the community usually, we do Guillotine Fridays. It's a lot of fun. You should hang out. Yeah, I'm bringing back the guillotine. So yeah, if you do move from the buy side to the sell side, we do remove you. So that's the Procurement Foundry. By the way, are there any? So let's take a quick look. I want to do a little bit of networking because this is what I like to do at these conferences. So first question, what size company do you work for? Do you work for an SMB? Raise your hand. By the way, look around the room because you're going to be here for 2 days with people. So this is your chance to find out who the people are that you want to talk to tonight around 9 o'clock at the bar. SMBs, beautiful. Mid-markets, $1 billion, okay. Large whales, any whales in the room? 5 billion, 10 billion? Yeah, a couple of you? Cool. All right. Are you managing all the tech spend or are you just category managers? Let's start a different question. CIOs, raise your hand. Chief procurement officers and procurement and IT category managers, raise your hands. Cool. Take a look around, meet each other at the bar. Get that moment at 10 o'clock when you're talking about how you take, I don't know, somebody to the woodshed or use PAS to do it because they're really good at it. Show of hands, who's responsible for software? Hardware? Cloud? It's everybody. Okay, cool. So this is a way for me to judge who's in the room. Years of experience. Do you have 10 years of experience? Raise your hand. Awesome, congratulations. 15? Any dinosaurs in the room with 20 plus? Amen, brother, I hear you. I'm with you. All right, last question. Does your technology procurement report to IT or does it report to a centralized procurement organization? Let's start with IT. Whose procurement organization reports to IT or is responsible for all IT spend inside of IT? One guy, one person. Everybody else has a central procurement organization that you bow down to on a regular basis. Is that correct? Awesome. So I'm sure you have a lot of questions for me about what procurement's thinking about, right? And how do I get them off my case and things like that. I'm not going to solve that for you right now, but I'll solve it at the bar later if you want to talk about what types of Christmas gifts we like and things like that. They're usually very small, under $25 works. All right, let's talk about trends because that's what I came here to actually talk about now that you know who I am and know what type of an organization I run. All right, so I run a procurement organization with 5,800 people in it. I listen to them a lot. I talk to at least 2 of them per day. 1 hour a day I donate to talking to my membership, right, for 30 minutes at a time. What on earth are their priorities? What are their trends? What are they talking about the most? The #1 problem in procurement right now is talent. There's a massive talent shortage. A little while ago, there were issues with the supply chain that threw a spotlight on side of procurement and sourcing and supply chain management. Now all of a sudden there's jobs coming out of everybody's ears. They all have recs available. Nobody can actually find talent because most of the people look like me. Approximately 72% look like me, to be exact, right? But they also have a situation with the fact that now all of a sudden we can work from anywhere. So now people can work in Bali and be the head of IT sourcing, right? So talent is the number one thing. This only started around 9 months ago. Before then, risk was the number one topic inside of Procurement Foundry. If you looked at the words that people were talking about, it was all risk management. It was risk management associated with facilities, technology, marketing and advertising, all sorts of things, right? Supply chain operational disruptions. We had an entire room dedicated to COVID and how to buy gloves and masks and things like that. We actually created a blacklist of people that were gouging other people so that the other folks inside of Procurement Foundry would know not to buy from them, right? It's amazing what happens when you get all these people in a room and they start talking to each other. So the other problem is you've got risk associated with brand and culture, supplier diversity inclusion, ESG, right? All of those issues associated with risk. And then you've got what we'll talk about a little bit later is risks associated, and I'll get into micros, things like what's happening with inflation and things like that right now. The third topic that everybody's talking about inside of the Procurement Foundry is corporate social responsibility, supplier diversity inclusion, and environmental sustainability and governance, right? Everybody's talking about this. If you can find me a marketing agency that's owned by somebody that's minority-based and does media buying, I can make them a billionaire in the next 6 months because they don't exist yet. So how are you, in all of my procurement people, whether they're getting it from their CIOs or they're being the procurement people that are attempting to, and they're not trying to check the box. That's the interesting part here. Most folks are not trying to check the box because they've been handing this from corporate on an edict saying, okay, we need to make a dent. We are a very large retailer, and 13% of our acquisition comes from, I don't know, Latin Americans. We buy less than 1% of our corporate spend from Latin Americans. How do we change that, right? I mean, you know this. This is not new. Try and find technology companies that are minority owned, veteran owned, things like that. So this is the number one. This is the number three thing that we're talking about. And for the first time ever in Procurement Foundry, in the 3 years that I've been tracking this, cost is the fourth item that everyone's talking about. Believe it or not, procurement people aren't really worried about cost anymore. Shocked? I am. I can't believe it. That is number 4 on the list right now of priority items for procurement people. CSR stands for Corporate Social Responsibility. SDI stands for Supplier Diversity and Inclusion. And ESG stands for Environmental Sustainability and Governance. Sorry? Social governance. I'm sorry. Thank you. Apologize. And then cost. So cost is an issue, right? Most of the procurement organizations that I deal with have already cut out all the low-hanging fruit in their organizations, and now they're going back to squeeze the orange a third or a fourth or a fifth time, right? There's a shift from cost containment to value acquisition, value add. Most chief procurement officers now are being told, hey, listen, I like the fact that you're saving me money, but I need you to figure out a way to add to my top line revenue now. How does procurement become a money maker for us? Through advancements in technology, through programs that you put together with our supply population to continuous improvement and enhancements in the products that we buy, right? Things like that. Most procurement people are being taught for the first time what trade working capital is, things like that, right? And then finally, they're getting massive pressure from the fact that suppliers need to grow their revenue on a regular basis. So that's one of the things that they talk about inside of cost. Make sense? Everybody? No? Nobody? This is public and private sector. So that's a good question. So Procurement Foundry has everything from the chief procurement officer at Rutgers University to the head of procurement for the state of California and some of the largest manufacturers in the world. It's totally agnostic. If you're in procurement in any sector in the world or in any industry, we'll take you. Yep. All right, I touched it once, it's working. So let's go down to tech sourcing, micro trends inside of tech sourcing, right? So this is probably more in line with what you see. The red highlighted ones are my own personal favorites on the to-do list, right? So there's risk and cost. These are the two biggest. So if I narrow it down to my IT category managers, the two biggest things that they're talking about is risk and cost, right? Supply diversity inclusion, kinda. Talent, they already got a job, so they're not worried about that much, unless they're looking for a new job, which most of them are, right? Because they're getting paid exorbitant amount of money. All of a sudden, procurement people have figured out that they're worth money, more money than they actually save, right? So the two big things that my procurement people talk about is risk and cost. What types of risk? Well, there's tons of risk. Supply chain disruption, right? Component level availability, delayed shipping. How long does it take to get a Cisco router right now? Too long? What, 6 months, 9 months? If you can get it. If you can get it. Try and get a Creston controller, right? Undefined delivery date. That's a new term. I like that. I don't know what that is. Can I get an undefined payment date on my invoice to go with my undefined delivery date? Here's one, SaaS-owned VC funding issue. And this is big in risk. Not a lot of people think about this, but we do talk about this actually. So what does that mean? Most of the SaaS companies that you all buy from are either owned or funded by a VC or a private equity fund, correct? What happens if the cash dries up before they get the profitability? That's a serious question. Cost of capital just went up, right? Most of you are using guinea pig SaaS companies which at guinea pig pricing right now, and you're trying some new things because they're coming up with the best innovations, but they might run out of money in the next 12 to 18 months if they don't get that next round. Then what? I hope you got a really good escrow account with the code so you continue to run it, because I know when I used to run IT and I used to run procurement, there's no such thing as a pilot, right? Or a sandbox. It's kind of like, hey, we're throwing this into production and we're gonna wing it, right? Cool. So there's a serious risk with the SaaS-based technology model in the fact that a ton of money could potentially dry up, and all of a sudden, the next wave of funding isn't going to come in for the amazing new product that just crushed it for your company, right? That's one that I'm really keeping an eye on. Cloud solution complexity and expansion, right? We all know about this, right? Why is it a risk? Because we can't keep up with the complexities and the expansions that's happening inside a cloud right now. Your procurement people certainly can't, and they're not technologists, right? So you're relying on somebody down the hall to actually be able to understand what a hyperfabric cloud, multi-dimensional something or another looks like, and they're like, all right, man, I just gotta get my kid to hockey practice, right? So that's another problem with risk, is the fact that this stuff is getting extremely complicated, faster than we can actually keep up. Vendor lock-in, right? Massive risk. Okay, I've put everything on the Azure cloud, now what the hell do I do? Well, you call PaaS, right? But vendor lock-in is a big thing. Or, oh my God, we just bought this applicant tracking system and now we can't get the hell out of it because it's got all our employee data in it, now what do we do, right? So there's risk associated with that. Geopolitical disruptions, right? What happens if your vendor of your mission critical system has a help center in the Ukraine right now? You have a problem, right? God forbid if you're in the wheat business right now, right? So you have geopolitical issues associated with upkeep and management. Maybe they're responsible for keeping up the applications. Maybe someone has outsourced, the company that you're doing business with has outsourced their support management services to a geopolitical arena or a theater that is currently another major problem that's being discussed with us in risk. Okay, last, also one of my favorites, request to approval purchase workflows. And I literally put this in there. Welcome to the 100-page InfoSec questionnaire, which doesn't take any time to increase the workflow, right? And we all know that that just slides right through nice and easy. So that's another risk associated with time, right? How much time are you losing actually attempting to purchase something that was supposed to save you $1 million last month? Try explaining that, by the way, sidebar for 1 second. As I told you, I used to work for a very large French consortium marketing agency. They are socialists. Try explain to a French-owned marketing agency that's a socialist-run theory that every month that they hold the contract for legal review, you're losing $1 million because they don't understand the concept of time cost of money. They're French, they're socialist, it doesn't exist to them. I show you the scars afterward at the bar to prove that. All right, last thing, cost. My folks are talking about cost all day long, the technology people. Increasing use of SaaS. SaaS was supposed to save us money. It doesn't, right? It's got a lot of implied click-through. People are buying it on open marketplaces. If you're like me and you had 45,000 blue-haired kids, they buy stuff on Amazon, on the Amazon marketplace, and all of a sudden, you got a software asset management nightmare on your hands, right? Because of the ease of use of being able to get to it, and because of the use of SaaS, you've got a cost situation on your hands, right? Yes, no, maybe? Anybody? This is what the procurement people are telling me anyway. All right, Great Resignation. I don't want to talk to the whole thing. Great Resignation, that's causing cost problems, right? Because now your labor costs are going up, your knowledge base is deteriorating, right? Your remote workforce. Now you're going to put laptops in every suburban household as opposed to having them all in one building in New York City, right? My personal favorite, tax ramifications associated with the distributed workforce. So you bought software in New York City based on one invoice. Now, 60% of the people that used to be in New York City now live in Connecticut and New Jersey. What did that do to your software license tax in usage model? How many of you know where the tax department is? Raise your hands. How many of you are well versed in sales and use tax? You desperately need to. I'll give you an example, okay? At my former employer, sorry, I'm gonna take that off the record. At my former employer, I may or may not have had Vertex with SAP, with Ryan Consulting out of Texas, with Ernst & Young on top of them watching everything that we were doing with sales and use tax. I thought I was a rock star. I was buying everything out of New York City until I met the lady with the tax department down the street. And she called me up and she goes, hey, Mike, can you explain to me why we bought 125,000 licenses of Microsoft in New York State when 35,000 people work in California and software is tax exempt? That was with all the systems I had in place. Nobody stopped to ask the question of where the hell the people actually live that use the software. And by the way, if you're thinking that you can move your invoice to California or Florida, that's tax fraud. I hope you look good in orange. Don't do it. I'm not recommending it. I am not a financial advisor, but I don't look good in orange, and I hope you don't either. So do not take a bill and move it somewhere. It's all about the usage. Sales and use tax is all about usage. By the way, fast forward 12 months later, I recovered $27.5 million I erroneously paid to the state of New York and funded a network upgrade for free. Crazy stuff when you learn sales and use tax. By the way, the sales and use tax likes coffee and donuts. The Treasury Department likes whiskey and bourbon. Okay. Last thing associated with, yeah, go ahead, brother. I'm sorry, can you up? I don't honestly know off the top of my head. I got a map somewhere in this laptop. I can pull it up and tell you later. Every state, by the way, this is an interesting fact around sales and use tax around technology and furniture. None of you buy furniture, but it's sales and use tax. Okay, every state decides their own thing. There are over 3,000 different taxing authorities in the United States alone. If you are buying inside of the loop, inside of Chicago, you're being taxed by approximately 9 different taxing organizations to get to your 11.25% tax on software. Now imagine if you put a purchase order in place for 100,000 employees in Chicago in the inner loop, because that's where your accounts payable department is, or that's where your CIO resides and he signs off on the invoice, and no one actually works in Chicago. You just paid Illinois, I don't know, on $100 million, you just paid them $11.25 million in sales tax, right? But all of your people work in Massachusetts at 6.25%. Guess what? The state of Massachusetts doesn't care that you just paid Chicago $11.25 million. They are going to assess penalties against you. Here's the problem with that. You busted your ass to negotiate a discount with whatever enterprise class client that you had. Or you paid them to bust their ass to negotiate for you, right? Average what, 10% savings, 15% savings? Penalties and fees will wipe that out in a year if you don't keep taxing up, right? There's a lot of money in tax. If you don't know it, go find your tax people. Like I said, bring coffee and donuts. They're really nice people. They're going to ask you some questions that you're probably going to want to fire yourself over, but you'll get there and there's money to be had in those hills. So that's what's happening from a micro perspective with all of my procurement buyers inside of IT. You look glazed, man. Is the heat killing you guys? I'm sorry about that. Any questions on any of this? You all got that sales and use tax thing down? Come on, I know you didn't. Took me a lot of time to learn that. Yep. And then the international rules are even worse. Okay? Not to mention the state of Texas. Yeah. Don't get me started on Texas. All right, next. So those are micro trends. What's happening that can help us? Countermeasures, right? Biotech. There are more biotech companies sprouting up right now than crocus outside of this building, right? It's estimated that there's somewhere between 1,000 and 1,500 biotech companies, spend analytics companies, purchase-to-pay systems, right? They're everywhere. It seems like every single person on the planet is getting some, crazy valuation, right? 2 people in a garage can start a biotech company tomorrow around supply diversity and inclusion, even though there's no single governing body that certifies small business owners for supply diversity and inclusion, right? VC funds pouring out of their ears money to buy into biotech and spend analytics, things like that. You know why? Because somebody finally figured out that if you save money, it goes directly to EBITDA. Oh my God, I don't have to find a new client this month, right? God forbid if somebody actually figures out that you're working on a 35 multiplier. If you save $1 million, guess what? That's a $35 million client. You don't have to walk in the front door if your procurement department or your CIO just saved $1 million this month. I would like to get paid as a $35 million sales rep who just landed a $35 million deal when I save $1 million for my company in bottom line savings on technology. By the way, you can use that. It's not patented, but it's a great way to negotiate or at least show the value. Say, hey, how much was the guy who brought in a $100 million client? Because I just saved us $10 million and we work on a 10% margin call, right? Cool. Community. So biotech's happening, right? Lots of money being spent, lots of companies cropping up. It's early days on this thing. It's going to get bigger. There's going to be a lot of consolidation in that space. Community. There's a lot of things happening in community. There are places for you to go now. You don't have to wait for a conference on a Tuesday night sitting in the back room talking about Microsoft anymore. Anybody on Discord? Your kids are, they're gaming. It'll come. I run a community with 5,800 people. As long as you're not selling something, you're welcome to join myself and my 1,500 other technology buyers. Happy to have you with us, and by the way, it's free. I know that sounds crazy, but it's free. There's other community too, right? Things like PAS, different types of things. PAS is SME pools. So the next thing is SME pools, subject matter expert pools. So what's happening is organizations like PAS are coming online and helping companies save ridiculous amounts of money because they are the subject matter experts, right? They're the hired guns. They are now, what's happening is there's a massive change from build to buy. I can't build expertise any longer because it costs me too much damn money. And oh, by the way, there's a war going on over talent. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to buy the expertise because I only need to plug them in for 3 months to help me renegotiate my Microsoft contract, right? And then, by the way, if you buy that knowledge from somebody like him, guess what? The guy who he puts on your case, he's on 7 different cases this year. You're never going to have a person that's that intelligent in your organization. They're only going to know about your one particular company's expertise. Why wouldn't you buy versus build? Okay. So, subject matter expertise, communities are building out massive pools of tenured professionals, guys like me, right? Old 52-year-old people who are well-weathered and know lots of stuff. They are looking for side hustle cash. Believe it or not, they work pretty damn cheap compared to what they know, right? And they can do it from Boca Raton. Amazing, right? Leverage the heck out of them. Also, we're remodeling, right? And what do I mean by remodeling? The entire theory of operations behind procurement and technology sourcing is being remodeled. And by that I mean this digitalization of teams, massive influx of technology that's coming in, geo arbitrage for talent. I run a recruiting and placement firm to go with my community. I hired somebody last week in Minot, North Dakota, who now works for a company in Miami. You know why? Because the guy in Minot, North Dakota was the best person for the job. And the guy in Miami said, if he wants to live in Minot, North Dakota, God bless him. He can stay there, right? So geo arbitrage associated with talent. Global geo arbitrage of talent. That's going to be the next big thing. You're going to see people working out of Switzerland, out of India, out of Pakistan, but they're working for US-based companies, but they're doing it without the consulting firm in between them. So somebody who was working in a procurement department before is going to be working for you on a side hustle cash, right? If you don't believe me, take a look at what's happening in the blockchain space with play-to-earn gaming. There are organizations and groups of people starting to play games for money based in Singapore on accounts with gaming of people in the United States. Geo arbitraging to make money on the blockchain, playing games with teams of people making it for them. So lots of different things happening. The last big thing that's happening in a remodeling effort is, like I mentioned earlier, we're going from tactical to strategic. So the people who used to cut the purchase orders and put things through in the systems, those people are being replaced by technology, and now everybody's being asked to think bigger and be much more strategic about their thought process. Never in a million years, 10 years ago, would you have asked a chief procurement officer how he's going to increase the top line of this company this year. Now it's on a regular basis. Everybody all right? Everybody getting all this? Cool. Countermeasures that you can use to offset what's happening to you at the speed of light. Emerging technologies, emerging topics, things you should be thinking about right now, whether you're a CIO or if you're in procurement or if you're a vendor here today or if you're, I don't know, folks tending bar behind me, okay? Blockchain, this is not made up. This is not going anywhere. How many of you are fairly familiar with what's happening in blockchain and how many of you have a digital wallet? Thank God Almighty. Okay, great. Get a digital wallet, buy some cryptocurrency. Don't buy a lot. Stable coins just got introduced. They're actually pegged to fiat. You know what happens when we actually create stable cryptocurrencies? We can now create financial products like insurance. Here's one for you to write down. Do you all have notepads? Somebody have a notepad? Anybody have a notepad? Yeah, you're gonna like this one. Baconcoin.com. Baconcoin.com is a private blockchain-based liquidity pool with a stable coin behind it that is now offering decentralized mortgages. They have 37 of them already. They have a pool of liquidity of about 6.8 million. They have a front end on the front end, and they're only loaning to Sallie Mae approved level loans. With a liquidity pool, I could own the house down the street, or at least a percentage of their mortgage if I wanted to. That's how far down the rabbit hole this already is. Other things, low code and no code. You guys must be really excited about this, right? You know what low code and no code means? That means that everybody gets to buy software now, right? I mean, you thought it was difficult controlling them before. Now they don't even have to be a coder to create an API connection. God bless Zapier, right? Now everybody who's got a weekend can figure out what to do, and they don't need you anymore. They'll just pass the approval process, right? Watch your T&E accounts. Watch your corporate credit cards. Watch how much software is being acquired. Or, God forbid, I'm sure you all know this, watch how much freeware is being purchased, but it's only freeware if it's being used for personal use. That's my own personal favorite from my advertising and marketing days, right? You can use this image, but only for personal use. And when you put it on the Coca-Cola ad, everybody's screwed. All right, marketplaces. Everybody's got a marketplace, right? Marketplaces are great, ease of use, but it also decentralizes the purchasing process, and all of a sudden you lose control, right? Hell, I'm building a marketplace inside of my community, right? And you're welcome to buy off of it if you choose, and I appreciate it if you do. Be real careful about marketplaces and the fact that they increase risk and they increase cost. The biggest problem with marketplaces, the Amazon marketplace, everything's retail. Oh, nah. Thanks. Does that happen automatically, or is that my cue to end? Whatever. Sorry. Thank you. That helps. Thank you. Digital natives. Next big emerging. Oh my God, it's like 30 degrees cooler. That's awesome. Digital natives. Next big emerging trend. Who here knows what a digital native is? Yeah, the kid who's a digital native knows what a digital native is. Digital natives are my 18 and 22-year-old children, right? We, or most of us, are what we like to call digital tourists. Guess how quickly Digital natives pick up no-code API capabilities on a weekend and start spending money on a corporate card that nobody told them they couldn't do because they got a deadline on Monday and they got to be done, right? Digital natives. It's the next big trend. And by the way, it's the people that you're probably going to be hiring next, right? They don't need tech support. They're their own walking tech support. They're better than your tech support. They know how to use their own stuff. They come with BYOD. They bring their own stuff. How dangerous is that still, right? All things you should be thinking about as far as emerging trends. There are more and more of them entering the workforce every day. Any questions around any of this? Any blockchain nerds in the room? Yeah? Pseudo? Yeah, stuff like that. We'll talk offline. We'll talk about cryptocurrencies and play to earn. And how about DAOs? Let's ask, before I go to the next slide, does anybody know what a DAO is? You do? It's a decentralized autonomous organization. It's a corporation without a corporation. Wrap your head around that for a little while. And then put a DAO with a stable coin with liquidity pools pouring money into it that become investment venture capital funds with nobody at the helm. They all just vote on what they're going to buy next week. You put in $1,000, I put in $100,000. I get 10 votes, you get 1. There's a DAO for golf courses. Absolutely. There's a DAO for NFTs. Everybody votes on one NFT they're going to buy this month. It's a decentralized autonomous organization. If you don't know what a DAO is, DAOs will be investing heavily in startups over the next 3 to 5 years. There's a DAO that runs a blockchain organization that buys mortgages and gives mortgages now. That is a DAO. If there's one thing you can take away, go look up DAO. It's going to scare the hell out of all of you. But you might invest in them at the same time. All right. Let's get personal. How much time do I have left? 15? Cool. Let's get personal. I thought you might be interested in talking a little bit about yourselves for a second, right? And I thought that I'd have some more IT sourcing people in the room, procurement people in the room. So the number one commodity that's out there right now, based on my community in the chatter, is tech sourcing professionals. By far, there's a massive shortage. The only thing that's shorter is truck drivers, right? And apparently plumbers, because my plumber books $150 an hour. But tech sourcing people are in massive demand right now. What does this mean for you? What should you be thinking about if you're in tech or in IT, or if you're a CIO and you're running your own procurement organization, right? Number one, how am I maximizing my expertise? How am I staying up on what's happening in emerging trends right now, right? What the hell is a blockchain and a smart contract, and how long before that's smacking me in the face, right? I need to know about that. How long before my vendor asks me to be paid in Ethereum? There are vendors taking payments in cryptocurrencies now. Lots of them. More coming. And I'm not talking about Tesla with Bitcoin. I'm talking about small software startup firms that are taking Dogecoin and then converting it immediately to stable coins because, I don't know, their owner has a ton of Dogecoin, or I don't know, they just like the picture on the Coke, and I have no idea. So how are you maximizing your expertise? How are you keeping up? If you're not keeping up, guess what? You're becoming obsolete every moment that you're not keeping up. Next, gig economy opportunities. If you're like me and you're thinking about getting the hell out at some point in the near future, you don't have to retire. You can actually make a ton of money in gig opportunities, right? Zillions and zillions of people want to know about what we have. Yes, there is ageism out there, no question about it, but there is an emerging need, and these collaboration communities like the one that I'm building in real-time marketplaces for short-term project-related work, propping up every day. If you got friends that are in marketing, send them to ripple.com. It's an online marketplace for talent, for advertising and marketing executives. How's my network and social presence? How many of you spend time on LinkedIn? How many actually publish things that makes you look smart? If you're not doing that, you're going to be like me. I had 650 connections when I left Publicis Group and decided to start my little consulting practice, and the 640 of them were vendors I had been beating up for the last 20 years. Not a great way to start a consulting firm. Really not good. None of those people wanted to talk to me, right? If you're not expanding your network on a regular basis, and you can do that now through social platforms, publish a blog post. You want to be a subject matter expert in Procurement Foundry? Give me a call. We'll write a blog together. You got a ghostwriter that'll help you. You want to get your word out there? You want to get your name out there? You want to build your own personal brand? You should be doing that. It helps with the negotiation process for your next gig, okay? Is there something that I can give back? Can you write a book? Can you be a mentor? All of these things you should be thinking about. Top skills in demand right now: analytical thinking and innovation, proactive, active listening, something that my wife says I'm absolutely horrible at, which I completely agree with her, right? Creativity. Creativity, think about that. I run a procurement organization with 5,800 people, and one of the most sought after skills is creativity. So the question becomes, how much of procurement is science and how much of procurement is art? To me, a 50-page contract looks like the Mona Lisa if it's written the right way. And a lot of my friends think exactly the same way. That's why we labor over them so much. There are there are Mona Lisa, right? And then finally, willing to embrace tech and change. If you are not willing to embrace change, I highly recommend you go get the book, Who Moved My Cheese? It takes about an hour to read, right? It's a really old book. You probably all know it, right? If you can't embrace change, you will be a dinosaur in procurement and in technology. You all know this. I don't have to tell you that. All right. Now, somebody asked me last night whether or not I asked my people around salary and compensation. Procurement Foundry runs a salary and compensation survey every year. We're in the process of running our third right now. I have 5,000 members. We're going to hit 1,000 people responding to our salary and compensation survey. That's 25% of my community is going to fill out a survey that I asked them to do, right? That's a huge number for a survey. Last year I had 800 people and 3,500 people. This is what the salary and compensation looks like. The first reason why I wanted to do this was to find out if women get paid less money than men. They do. And the further south and to the right you go, they get paid less along the way. So if you're in Alabama or Mississippi and you're in head of procurement department, you should probably move to the Pacific Northwest if you're a female. And should you have an MBA or an industry certification? We have that information as well. I just wanted to show a quick slide to show you that the average procurement person inside of my organization right now makes fully loaded about $121,000 per year, but you can see it starts at junior associate and moves all the way over to C-level. The reason why I don't have a C-level number is because I only had 15 people at the C-level answer the survey last year, and I didn't think it was a big enough data set, so I pulled it out, right? But I thought you'd be interested to know that there are free spaces where you can learn about how much you're worth if you're in IT and IT procurement, right? Last week, I got an email from somebody at a major insurance company in the West. Said, thank you very much for the salary and compensation survey. I took that back in March. All 37 of my people are currently getting raises based on your information. I said, great, if you can get all 37 of them to fill out this year's survey, I would really appreciate it. Somebody called me and said, your data is better than Mercer's. How the hell did you do it? I said, I don't know, I just asked them. And they gave it to me, right? This is one page of a 17-page deck, which if you want it, I can get it for you. It's free, by the way, for Procurement Foundry members. It's free for everybody. I was just kidding, right? And the reason why is because I'm trying to do something right for people. I want people to be able to get better jobs and get better pay. I want them to be able to collaborate. I want them to have mentors. I want them to find better jobs. I want them to save their companies more money. Most of all, I don't want to inhibit the collaboration process of all you being able to talk to each other about how you save money and about how you do your jobs better, or if you want a new job. Last takeaways. So tech sourcing, probably the biggest takeaway is tech sourcing people are in demand. Whether you're a CIO or you're head of technology sourcing right now, you're in ridiculous demand. There are bidding wars for procurement people or people who know how to actually buy procurement. I know because I'm running a recruiting company right now. Procurement Foundry has started a recruiting firm. If you buy technology and you're looking, please come and see me because there's absolutely ridiculous bidding wars. I had somebody nailed 60 days, 7 interviews last week, 30% raise. Called us up on the day he was supposed to accept and write his offer, said, I went back and talked to my boss, they're gonna increase my pay by 45%, thanks for coming. Bidding wars for someone who probably, honestly, isn't worth it. But they're paying for it. Because all of a sudden they're going, hey, this guy saved me $2 million last year and I paid him $170,000. Do I really care? Right? He paid for himself 20 times over before he actually gets smart and calculates what his value is in EBITDA money on a multiplier. So, procurement macros, again, my entire community is talking about things like talent, risk, diversity. They're talking about cost last right now. It is the least most important thing on their agenda right now is cost. Talent and risk. Number 2, tech sourcing. All about risk. Everything's risk. And then cost. Cost isn't even number 1 with the actual procurement people who buy technology, which is shocking to me. Third, emerging topic support options. Buy tech is there. Subject matter experts like Paz are there. Communities like Procurement Foundry are there. People are redesigning their organizations to think outside of the box based on what happened with COVID and the fact that we're now forced to all be digital and remote. All of those driving things that you should be thinking about from emerging support options that are available to help you actually solve what you have to do, which is to operate your business more efficiently, in some cases so that the shareholders like you more. I think I'm done. Am I done? I am done. Any thoughts? Any ideas? Any best practices I missed? Any trends that I missed? I want to hear them. Anybody who wants to book 30 minutes with me to talk, I'll take it. I'm a student of the game all day long. Because right now I run the largest community in the world associated with procurement, and 1,500. Almost 1/4 of my population is buying technology on a daily basis. I want to know what you need to know, what you need, and what your problems and issues are, so I can help drive my community better. And if you want to know what my community is thinking, I'm happy to give you 30 minutes of my time. Yes?
What is the biggest micro demand within technology? In other words, cloud, software, what do you see the biggest?
Cloud is a very interesting one. Great question. What I'm seeing in inside of the chat rooms right now is the fact that we've gone almost too far cloud and it's time to go back to hybrid in some way, shape, or form, because there's too much risk associated with 100% cloud architecture. And the procurement people are trying to figure out how the hell to renegotiate that, considering their cloud spend for the first time in a very, very long time is not going to go up 65 to 200% next year, right? Because now they got to go out and buy some hardware. One of the other biggest trends I'm seeing around cost is how to offset the fact that you can't get a Cisco router for 9 months, right? Park Place Technologies, the guys who sell third-party maintenance, they're sitting on a massive repository of hardware. If you can't get routers in 9 months, guess what? Buy refurb. They're 30 cents on the dollar and they work just as well. I'm going to say something that the CIOs probably won't like too much. The blinky lights on the refurbs work just as well as the blinky lights on the brand new shit. Let's be honest, right? Any questions? That's a great question. That's one of the things I'm seeing. The question is, the procurement people, how are they being measured? And there's a bonus pool associated with procurement people. Believe it or not, some people are actually starting to work on gain share models in procurement. So they'll take a base pay plus whatever they save. I talked to a CFO the other day who hasn't had a procurement officer yet. He wants to hire his first chief procurement officer. He said, I'll pay, this is crazy. He said, I don't want to pay more than $225,000. I said, how much is the bucket of spend you want this person to manage? And they said, just under $1 billion in third-party spend. He said, but here's what I'm willing to do. If I can get them for $200,000 to $225,000, I will give them 10% of their savings. I said, I will take the job right now. Right now. I will close Procurement Foundry, and I will retire in 6 months. You're a brand new company. You've never had a chief procurement officer before. You have $1 billion in third-party spend that's never been picked before. The low-hanging fruit in your organization, I could sleepwalk through $200 million in savings in the first year. I'll take 10%. You cut me a check for 20. You can pay me. How about this? I'll give you the $225,000 back. So yes, there are other strategies associated with compensation. However, you got to have the right CFO in office to be able to do that, right? You got to have a CFO who actually starts to think of procurement people like salespeople. Believe it or not, procurement people are actually more dangerous than salespeople. They can add more to the bottom line. Just nobody's ever talked about it before, right? There's no salesperson on the planet that's going to bring that company $200 million. They work on a 9%, 10% margin. That's $200 million on $1 billion. Conservatively, you're going to tell me that there's a sales rep out there that's going to bring $2 billion into the front line? Never going to happen. I can drop $200 million and you want to pay me $225,000? Oh, and by the way, this guy is 90 miles outside of Dallas and he wants somebody at his office. I'm like, forget it. I'm not even going to take the open rec. I don't want to recruit for this job because nobody wants to work 90 miles outside of Dallas. It's not going to happen. I got a stud in Butte, Montana. You want him? No, he's got to be in Dallas. I said, all right, then you don't get the stud. Sorry. If you're not playing the remote hiring game right now to get the talent that you need, and there's probably studs in Australia, and there's amazing people in India, right? India, average wage, what, $4,000, $5,000 a year? Come on. You pay them $25,000 a year, they live like a king. That's 1/10 of what you're going to pay somebody in the United States. I'm not talking that I love keeping jobs on the mainland. But at the same time, there are some really interesting people, and COVID and the fact that we're now working remotely has just opened up a whole new world. I just hired an advertising agency in Romania. Romania. They're the best agency I've ever seen. I don't want to tell you what I'm paying them. I felt so guilty. I felt so guilty about what I paid them that I actually sent it back the invoice with a 20% uplift. So, some gifts because I got to go, and Eric's looking at me like, get the hell off the stage. There's a guy named Brad Veach. Any of you know who Brad Veach is? Don't raise your hand. I know you already know. You know who Brad Veach is? He's the single largest software buyer in the United States, probably in the world. He is the head of software purchasing for Walmart. Brad just wrote a book. I bought 50 of them. Brad signed them, and I brought them here for you. They're free from me to you. You want to see what the guy who buys $1.5 billion a year worth of software has to say about negotiating software contracts? There's 5 up here, and there's 50 more over on a desk. You're welcome to have it. Okay? Brad also speaks at our conferences, and Brad is also going to be, when we light it up, the Procurement Foundry Institute. Brad will be teaching in class because I believe that actual practitioners should be teaching the next generation and not academics. Brad will be teaching a class on IT software sourcing at the Procurement Foundry Institute when we light that up later this year. That's it, unless you got more questions. You got to have more questions. All right, I'm going to be at the bar. Come ask me more questions.